Welcome, Frankfort and Franklin County residents, and thank you for tuning in to the Candidate Forum for Franklin County P.V.A., which stands for Property Valuation Administrator. This is the Democratic Primary Election Forum, which will be held May 21st, 2024. This is a special election due to a vacancy in the office, and will be on the ballot again in 2026 for a full 4-year term. I'm J.C. Young, and I'm honored to be the moderator of this event, and I serve on the Chamber Government Affairs Committee, and I would like to thank the Frankfort Chamber of Commerce for allowing me to participate. The office of P.V.A. is a successor in Kentucky to the office of a county tax commissioner, which became a constitutional office in 1850. The 1968 General Assembly changed the title to Property Valuation Administrator. For all practical purposes, the office of P.V.A. in 2024, as we know it, is viewed as both a county officer being elected in each county and also a state officer working closely with the Department of Revenue. The role of P.V.A. is to make assessments of all property in the county, prepare property assessment records, and perform other duties relating to assessments as the legislature or the Department of Revenue may prescribe. The P.V.A. assesses property for the state, the county, and other districts such as city governments. The office that both of you are seeking over the years has become increasingly more challenging as inflation, a nationwide housing shortage, and governmental office staffing continue to cause issues. Knowing the obstacles you have ahead, I'd like to publicly thank you both for seeking this office in our home, Franklin County. In this candidate forum for Franklin County P.V.A., we're honored to have Mr. Wil Rhodes, Miss Dottie Gatewood. Before we begin, I'd like to thank and recognize the Frankfort Area Chamber of Commerce for establishing this candidate forum and the Frankfort Plant Board for hosting and broadcasting this event. Serving as our esteemed panelists and those doing the real work at this function are CEO of Expree Credit Union and immediate past chair of the Frankfort Area Chamber of Commerce, Mr. John Graham. Frankfort Area Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Ms. Tish Shade. Chamber Chair-elect and Chair of the Frankfort First Foundation, Associate Executive Director of AGC of Kentucky, Ms. Lynn Faulkner. Candidates, you will have 2 minutes for opening remarks and 2 minutes for closing remarks. You'll have 1-minute responses to questions asked by the panelists with a 1-minute follow-up if asked. We have a timekeeper, and I would ask the candidates to be respectful of this process and pay attention to the time you have allowed. We had a draw prior to the forum, and opening remarks are going to begin with Mr. Rhodes and followed by Ms. Gatewood. Mr. Rhodes, 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir, and good afternoon, and thank you for having me, and thank you for the Chamber and the Frankfort Plant Board for putting this together. My name is Wil Rhodes. I was born and raised here in Franklin County, grew up in South Frankfort, attended 2nd Street School and Frankfort High, and thereafter attained my degree in political science with emphasis on policy analysis from Kentucky State University. My wife, Sarah, works for the independent school system as a counselor, and her and I have 3 children, 2 daughters in the 3rd grade and a son that's about to turn 4 here in the day after election, actually. So we attend First United Methodist Church, and I also serve on the Finance Committee of the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation, as well as I'm on the Board of Advisors for the Franklin County Community Fund. I'm the former president of the Franklin County Young Democrats and the former state treasurer of the Kentucky Young Democrats. I'm currently your Franklin County P.V.A. appointed by Governor Beshear after the retirement of Kelly Lang. I previously served as Executive Director of Financial Management and Administration at the Department for Local Government. There we were charged with overseeing all the municipal finance of 118 counties and over 400 cities throughout the state. Working alongside with those judge executives, mayors, fiscal courts, county clerks, sheriffs, and PVAs gives me a unique experience and background because I've seen what works and what doesn't work throughout the Commonwealth. The relationships that officials have with each other goes a long way with making the county the best that it can be. My goal today and going forward as your Franklin County P.V.A. is to ensure fair and equitable assessments for the 22,000 plus parcels in Franklin County, increase accessibility of public information, collaborate with other city and county officials, and to reduce and eliminate redundancies and become the best and most well-ran P.V.A. office in the state of Kentucky.
Thank you. Ms. Gatewood, 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Dottie Gatewood, and I've been a resident of Frankfort since I was 18 years old. When I first moved here, we lived in South Frankfort. Then we moved to West Frankfort, and now we live in East Frankfort. So we've lived in pretty much all areas of the county. I have been a broker of Gatewood Associates Realty for the past 30 years and involved in real estate even prior to that. My father was a builder, and I sold my first house when I was 9. I think in order for the P.V.A. to do the job effectively and to do it right, they must understand property evaluation, because each piece of property in this county has an assessment, and that assessment is based on what the tax bill is going to be. Those assessments need to be correct, and they need to be fair. And in order to do that, the property valuation administrator needs to understand those values and to make sure that they stay fair. Also, interacting with the P.V.A. office over the last 30 years, been quite familiar with what all's gone on with the P.V.A. office, known the P.V.A.s, and how the office functions. And I have found over the years that there's been some data that it's either not been there or maybe not been correct. And I like to see a process set in place that would continue long after I'm gone, that the data would be evaluated for fairness and correctness in the system, and therefore that would keep everything fair for everybody.
Thank you both for your opening statements. And since we started with Will, we're going to start with you, Ms. Gatewood. Tish, our first question comes from you, directed to Ms. Gatewood.
What is the biggest challenge in the P.V.A.'s office right now, and how will you address it if elected?
1 minute.
Right now is keeping the office on track. Each year, 1/4 of the county quadrant is evaluated for the tax assessments, and those notices need to be sent out, and there's a 2-week period in May that people can come in and challenge those, and those that needs to stay on time, and the P.V.A. needs to be able to work with these people to make sure that their assessments are correct. And also, the office needs to stay within its budget. Each county office has its own budget based on the tax roll. And of course, staffing in the office is important to make sure everyone knows their job and does it effectively and does it on time.
Thank you. Will, 1 minute.
Yes, sir. I wouldn't disagree with any of those challenges that Ms. Gatewood pointed out, but my biggest priority for the challenges are to make sure that accurate assessments are done. I want to increase the access for data for all citizens to be able to use the data that their P.V.A. office has, whether that's through mapping improvements or right now we're going through the process of putting deeds online in collaboration with the clerk's office, which will cut down on attorneys, other different professions having to come down and look at those deeds, and just evolve the technology. As business-oriented Chamber knows that technology is evolving every day, and I want to incorporate everything we can at the P.V.A.'s office to ensure that the People's Office of the Property Valuation Administrators is up to date as possible and as user-friendly as possible.
Great. Our next question comes from Lynn Faulkner, and that's going to be directed to you, Mr. Rhodes.
Mr. Rhodes, how do you determine the assessment on property?
Well, when you determine the assessment on property, a lot of that has to do with the market, right? There'll be a fair transaction done by 2 willing participants for a parcel that kind of sets the tone for other comparable properties and stuff throughout the community, whether it be farmland, multifamily, commercial, residential. So, and then if there's one that hasn't been assessed in a long time, there's a scale that kind of goes into place with price per square footage, and that's going to vary from area to area. So yeah, again, the market in a perfect world, the market, things would change hands and the market would keep up. with those assessments, or the assessments would keep up with the market. But in the case where there's a lot of homes that have been lived in for a long time, you're going to have to do that with the formula on price per square foot and so forth.
Ms. Gatewood, 1 minute.
Okay, could you please repeat the question?
Sure. How do you determine the assessment on property?
Okay, how is it, okay. Once a piece of property is sold, the sale price becomes the assessment, and property is valued on what it was worth January 1. So if a house is under construction, it's how much of the house was underway January 1. Then after property has been on the rolls for a while, then there's some counties that actually have software such as Fayette and Jefferson, the larger counties that can actually go through and analyze those with a computer program. In Franklin County, it's more hands-on trying to determine because different markets may appreciate more than others, so you really need to stay on top of the market and know what's sold and be able to interpret the market variables on such as the components that a house has.
Mr. Graham, your next question is directed to Ms. Gatewood. Ms. Gatewood, you have 1 minute.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Gatewood, there is some legislation being considered by the General Assembly talking about the homestead exemption and as far as freezing the property rate for anyone age 65 or older. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, yes. That is State Bill 23, and it did not go anywhere this time, so I'm hoping that it gets reintroduced. What it would entail is whatever the assessment was when the person turned 65, then that assessment would freeze. They would still get a tax bill, and whatever the assessment was then would just continue. The average age of a Kentuckian is 73 and a half years. So on the average, they get the benefit of that for about, 8 years. Right now, they have a homestead exemption and a disability exemption that when you become 65 years old, they will subtract, it's like $42,000 from the assessment, or if you're disabled, that can also be subtracted, but you cannot get both.
I got the gist, but can you please repeat that as well?
Sure. Basically, it's the legislation being considered by the General Assembly talking about the homestead exemption.
Right.
And should there be a freeze on the property rate for anyone over the age of 65?
Sure. Yeah, there were a couple bills concerning that in this past legislative session. I guess they could take it back up, but it wouldn't be veto-proof. One was a constitutional amendment, and as alluded to, the freezing of the assessment. I know we want to keep our seniors in our homes as long as we possibly can, as long as they possibly can, and the homestead exemption actually increases about every 3 years. It's currently $46,000 and due for an increase the next. So there are mechanisms for that to keep up and help those seniors. I'm proud to say, for the first time in the P.V.A.'s office, we started sending letters to people who turned 65 this year, right, to make them aware of the homestead exemption. Not a lot of people do know. So if anybody out there is over 65 and in their own home, please come down and see us and get that homestead exemption. However, I would have to disagree with my opponent on that. I think the legislation I've seen would completely gut our schools and local governments of much-needed funds. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Ms. Shade. We're going to go back down the line here, and it's going to be directed to you, Mr. Rhodes. You'll have 1 minute.
In your opinion, what is the most challenging part of assessing a property?
The most challenging part, currently we're getting out in the field, taking pictures. At any time, I think in this current political world, a lot of people don't like any kind of government vehicle pulling up on their property, but so that can be a challenge in getting to different parcels that might have a gate lock, such as we need to see a barn on a property, stuff like that. But with new mapping that I'm hoping to bring in, we can alleviate that and do a lot of stuff from the office. But we still want to get out there in the community, and I would say, in a word, time is with 22,000 parcels and doing that quadrennially. That's a time-staking manner to go through with the assessments and give each property the the detail and that it deserves. So, yeah, time would be that, but we hope to alleviate that with new technology that we're looking at every day. Thank you.
Ms. Gatewood, 1 minute.
Okay, the most challenging part is what we would need to do is pull up property by the subdivision, see what recent sales are in there, and then those that have sold, whether they're greater square footage, less square footage, more components, whatever, and then use your knowledge of appraising and market variables. Actually, appraisers use a term called match paired analysis when they're coming up with how much each component would contribute, like how much would a fireplace contribute, how much would a finished basement, a second bath. And what they do, they line up property, and through that analysis, they can determine how much contributing value that is. The Department of Revenue requires that the property, the average sales price of the property be within 90% of what the appraisal is, so that is a goal that the PVA must achieve, or try to achieve, rather.
Our next question comes from Ms. Faulkner. It's going to be directed to you, Ms. Gatewood. You'll have 1 minute.
What is the process? What is the process you would use to approve or decline a request for a reduction in the assessed value of the property?
Well, I would ask the person to bring in the information that they thought that made their property either over-assessed, I'm sure they would be wanting to reduce it, and to come in, and then we could sit down and look at other properties in that market for that house and see if how it compares if it is overassessed. A lot of people like to come in and challenge their assessment based on the assessment of their neighbors, and that doesn't fly. The assessments are based on actual sale prices of other property within its market. So I would be very open to listening to them and would work with them any way possible, because I want everyone to feel that their assessments are fair, and I would like for anyone that had any questions to make sure that they were answered and they knew where we were coming from.
Mr. Rhodes, 1 minute.
Yes, sir. There already is a process in place, and that's laid out in statute per the Department of Revenue. If you do receive a notice of increase in your valuation, you have every right to come down and schedule a conference with the P.V.A. or staff and make your case. Why you think your valuation is too high. If there is between the P.V.A. and the property owner or staff that they can't come to an agreement, then it gets kicked over to the Board of Assessments, who then takes a look at the valuation, and and the P.V.A. and their staff is kind of removed from that for objectivity, right? And then again, if that's not done, then there's another appeals process. So the process is already there. I think with the P.V.A., you want to just educate the public and let them know what their options and rights are if they do want to contest something. And again, the market kind of sets the rate, but then again, assessments do need to be made. So the process is there. If you need to come down, please do.
Our next question comes from Mr. Graham. It's going to be directed to you, Mr. Rhodes. Mr. Rhodes, you'll have 1 minute for response.
Mr. Rhodes, with the working with the public, obviously is a very important part of the PVA's job. In your opinion, what are some of the critical factors for communicating with the public?
Yeah, no, this is the people's office. You are a public servant, which I hold a deep value towards. My family's worked in public service for generations, and again, this is Franklin County's P.V.A. office. So communicating with the citizenry is of paramount importance. Our website is free, one of only 5 in the state, I believe, that is free and open. And again, we're looking to build upon that to kind of be a one-stop shop of adding deeds online, different mapping components on our free website. But also, I want to, as you say, communicate more through that website, and anything they need to know, whether it's a link to the homestead exemption, the appeals process, anything. Again, it's in the 21st century, if you can click a button and get your answer, most people would like to do that, as opposed to coming down and knocking on the door or even making a phone call. So no, communication is very paramount for the office, and I look forward to improving on that.
Ms. Shade, I'm coming back to you. This next question is going to be I'm sorry. I apologize. Ms. Gatewood, 1 minute.
Oh, okay, yes, communication is very important, not only to the public, but the other people that come in and use the offices, whether they're attorneys, insurance agents, real estate agents. They need to have their needs met because the information, they need it for their jobs. And I also believe in cross-training, whoever's working in the office, for them to be able to do each other's job, and for each person to realize that we're there to serve the public, and we're to make sure that that they're treated respectfully and fairly, and every effort is made to answer their question.
You both are doing a great job. Clearly, the moderator, we got to wonder about it. It's a team effort here. Ms. Shade, we're coming back to you, and this is to you, Mrs. Gatewood. You'll have 1 minute.
What is your strategy for maintaining a network of property professionals such as mortgage lenders, realtors, and construction industry professionals?
For me? Okay. Well, okay, all the industry professionals, as part of their job, they do need different information from the P.V.A. office. An insurance agent may call up, or rather look on the website and see the grid that has the square footage. A real estate agent would need to call down and need to know the P.V.A. number, because everything in the MLS database is linked with that. Attorneys, if they get ready to file a suit against someone, they'll need to know what other property they own. There's the information that the P.V.A. keeps is very critical to people in the community being able to do their jobs correctly. And I think that is very important to be able to provide correct information, and I am prepared to do that.
Yeah, no, those relationships of people that use the P.V.A. office, whether citizens or attorneys, bankers, mortgage brokers, anybody really, are very important. I'd like to do something called Lunch and Learn, where I'm updating those professionals of what is going on in our office, maybe some pending legislation that's going to affect us that'll affect them as well, and just keeping them up to date on that technology, because again, our website is going to be free to use and for all these professions or citizens to use. So I think just being visible, being there, being in the office, being visible, having people comfortable in coming in and talking to you or reaching out. There are attorneys in the office almost daily. I've met with Elbar and had a great conversation with them, and look forward to a further relationship. So again, be visible, proud to be a member of the Chamber of Commerce myself, and just really foster those relationships that make people comfortable in using their P.V.A. office.
Ms. Faulkner, you have a question directed towards Mr. Rhodes, and this will be a 1 minute response.
Are there new programs or technologies that you would like to have for training for your employees, communication or education efforts for the taxpayers?
Absolutely. I went to a class, I said this in my Meet the Candidates, but I went to a class about mapping that just blew me away. As you all know, in the business world, things are evolving very quickly at all time. And this mapping service was in Scott County, and it was put on by the P.V.A., and they had their mayor, their judge executive, the EMS, the school systems, any government entity you could think of, and they were all getting ready to use this. And it comes from a flyover that goes through the county and has a plane take not only aerial views, but 45-degree angle views as well, that really capture the property. Because right now we're on aerials where you can't really tell, you just see the top of it, right? You don't know if it's a 3-story building or just one. But anyway, this property or this technology can be used by not only the P.V.A. office, but everybody. I've talked to the sheriff's department and asked him what kind of mapping they were using, and he's using. Can I use the bonus? Don't I have a bonus?
No, not in this forum.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
There's a lot of technology I'd like to improve on.
We can address it in the closing statements, which will be coming up shortly.
Yes, technology is very important. It seems to carry over into everything these days, and it's important to stay on top of it. Currently, Franklin County does have a GIS service there's a map out there with an overlay of each property. And if you go on the P.V.A. website, up at the top where it has the owner's name, right under that, it'll have the word view, and it's blue and it's underlined. If you clicked on that, that'll take you to the GIS service, and it'll show you the actual property, and it'll have a red line around it. It's not exactly accurate. I understand that it's like within 20 feet for the most part. But I think that we need to keep an ongoing search for anything that can improve the technology that we have, because it's always so fast moving.
Mr. Graham, our next question goes to you, Ms. Gatewood. You'll have 1 minute for response.
Ms. Gatewood, much like life, sometimes you have a challenging property owner. I said, much like life, sometimes you face difficult people or a challenging property owner. If such a situation arises over the opinion of what the value of the property is, how would you address that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. My question is basically, if you have a difficult or a challenging member of the community who is not happy with their P.V.A. value, how do you handle that situation?
Well, first of all, you would need to meet with them and see where they're coming from. It could be that they don't have the correct information, but to see if it can be worked out, make every effort to work it out. And then if it's not, then there's a county board that they can present their case to, and then they would make a decision. And if they don't like that, then there's a state board the Department of Revenue has. And of course, the Department of Revenue would be the final. But the first step would be for them to come in and talk with the P.V.A. and see if something could be resolved, especially if it's going to be a difficult situation.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, as we alluded to in earlier questions, there is a process in place for them to state their case on what they think their property should be. But people have bad days, though, right? So I mean, the first thing is treat them with respect, and you're providing a customer service. You're there to provide that customer service every day, first and foremost. So obviously treat everybody with respect and kind of walk them through the process, and that kind of goes back in with the education and the communication, right? Again, if there's something that they can find, a process that they can find on our website, as opposed, I mean, they're probably getting madder by the second every time they drive down there. So again, just communicating and educating, and always, this is the people's office, and treat them with respect.
We've now reached a time for closing remarks. We started with you, Mr. Rhodes, so this time, Ms. Gatewood, I'm going to start with you. You have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
Okay. I've been interested in real estate for like my entire life, and even back when I was getting a BS degree at Kentucky State, I had several real estate classes. I've got a master's degree from Kentucky State in business, in personnel and statistics, and then I've had 2 jobs with state government, each one that lasted about 3 years. The first one being with the Division of Real Properties and Finance, where they actually owned all the properties and kept up with the ownership, and if someone died, that the property would revert to the state. And then my second job had been as the Director of State Risk in the Department of Insurance, and I was over the fire and tornado insurance program, and we had to value all the state property for insurance purposes. I had 3 appraisers on my staff, and we also procured the master auto insurance for both the state auto and state government, and also was involved in some of the adjusting. So I've had quite a bit of experience with valuation of property, and I know both commercial property, real estate property, investment property, vacant land. I am familiar with it. I know every street in Frankfort, and I have been in most houses in Frankfort and know most of the residents that are here. And I can't think of anyone else that could do a better job than I could. Thank you.
Ms. Rhodes, 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you again to the Chamber of Commerce and the Frankfort Plant Plant Board for putting this together. And thank you to the citizens of Frankfort and Franklin County for being the most informed, thoughtful, and active voting populations in the entire Commonwealth year in and year out. As we discussed here today, the P.V.A. office is the backbone of the revenue of our community. Our schools, our city and county governments, our first responders, and it's important that we have someone in the office that is going to show up and do that job and realizes the importance of the task. Experience does matter, and relationships matter as well. As you fill out your ballots in May and decide who you think will be the best person for the position, I'd like for you to ask yourself a couple questions. Are you tired of not having the amenities that our neighbors and surrounding communities have? Are you tired of our children and grandchildren not returning to Franklin County after college because they feel another community can meet their needs better? If the answer to those questions is yes, then you have a clear choice in this election, and that choice is Wil Rhodes for Property Valuation Administrator of Franklin County. I humbly ask for your vote and your help in moving Franklin County forward. Thank you.
As we close, I would like to personally thank you both for seeking this office. You've put your name on the ballot, spent your own time and money, skipped out on family events only to serve your community, and I want you to know that it's appreciated. You've both done a great job in this forum, and I wish you the best in this election. There have been some election law changes statewide in the last several years, and now there are multiple ways for you to cast your ballot in this election, a few of which include mail-in absentee ballots, in-person early voting before Election Day on May 16, 17, and 18, 2024, and in-person Election Day voting May 21st, 2024. If you don't know where or how to vote, please call the Franklin County Clerk's office at 502-875-8702 or check out their website. It's loaded with current election information. Voting is a right in this country provided by our Constitution, and these new voting opportunities will hopefully increase turnout, and I sincerely hope you honor those veterans and those that are currently serving and exercise your right as an American. It's been an honor to serve as the MC for this event, and I would like to thank all the folks that aren't on camera for all of their work to help make this possible. I failed to mention and introduce our fabulous timekeeper, Miss Kathy Lindsay. We thank her for her work, and the camera folks, IT folks, chamber staff. That concludes this forum, and I thank you for joining us.